This is the Soft Power Podcast, episode 34. To really compete as a professional or business owner, you have to own the room. That's why each week I bring you hot topics, tips, and expert interviews so you can stand out in competitive places. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Susan Callender, and I help professionals and business owners increase their social capital so they can stand out in competitive situations. That was my elevator pitch. And my guest today is a leading authority in the art of the personal pitch and connecting with people in professional settings. Andrew Winig is the elevator pitch coach, and his mission is to help you eliminate those awkward pauses from networking conversations by making sure you craft a clear and concise answer to the age-old question of, what do you do? Andrew, welcome to the show.
Well, that's a great way of starting it off. Yeah, so I teach people the elevator pitch, and more generally, I teach them how to business network, how to use their elevator pitch to start the kinds of conversations that lead to good leads.
What was your background prior to that?
Well, I came to it the way people usually do to this sort of marketing stuff. I'm a computer programmer by training, programming and managing engineers, and got laid off 2 recessions ago now, and started a couple of businesses. And as part of starting the business, I was doing some cold call selling. And, I don't mind cold call selling once I'm out doing it, but the act of getting out the door every day, I found to be just crazy. And people were telling me, network, build your network, you have to go networking. And it was so frustrating because I went to a bunch of events, I joined a bunch of chambers, and just nothing worked. I mean, I wasn't getting any leads, and nothing seemed to make sense. And so I actually started with the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, joined one of their networking groups, and the guy who was leading that, I started learning from him how you build conversations, how you talk about what you do in a way that gets people interested, how you follow up effectively. And over the years, I just developed these techniques. I applied my engineering skills to figuring out the networking. I try stuff out. If it works, I tweak it to see if I can make it work better. If it doesn't work, I throw it out and try something else. So I've really taken a very consistent approach to figuring out how to do business networking. And, most of the advice that's out there just doesn't work. Out of necessity for building my business and for not wanting to spend the rest of my life cold calling, I just learned how to get to know people and start doing referral selling.
I love how you just stated that, because most people, they just take for granted that something good and valuable is just supposed to come right out of your mouth, but it requires time and thought.
Yeah, I took it very seriously, and it took a while to learn. I mean, and the thing too is people forget. I mean, if you ask people about business networking, everyone knows it's about developing relationships. People forget that you don't develop a relationship in a 30-second prepared speech. Like that's not how you would ever start a relationship. So it's a little bit of separating those. The elevator pitch is about starting the conversation, getting to the next conversation. It's not about making the sale.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Andrew. What did you think of my pitch?
The answer, I loved your introduction, I got to say. And the thing I always say to people is, how's it working for you? Right? Like if you're getting the kind of response that you want from it, if you're getting into the kinds of conversations that are good for your business, I think it's great. If not, what I help people with is coming up with different ways of saying it. I like to say, if you stretch out to 30,000 feet, right? The elevator pitch is you say a bunch of words and people say a bunch of words back. And if you don't like the words that are coming back to you, all you have to do is change the words that you're saying. And so I have a lot of experience. I've written hundreds of elevator pitches. And the way I help people say it differently so they can get a different reaction from people. And that's what you're looking for. What you're looking for is to say different words to get to the kind of reaction that you want. And most people just put something together and say it and don't really pay any attention to what comes back to them. And that's really the opportunity, right? The opportunity is to say something, see how people react. Once you know how they're reacting, you can change it and see if they're reacting better or worse.
Those are all great points. What I try to tell people, even though this is your area of expertise, is to try to make it more exciting or interesting, because you are not your job function. You are more than that. What do you think of that formula of, I'm sure you've heard of the I help X do Y so they can Z?
So I use that formula, except I help a group of people take an action. Mm-hmm. But the thing I encourage people to do is to be really, really specific about the group of people and the action. And I use an example of real estate a lot, because anybody who's buying or selling a home, and that's not true. That's not a good that's not a good thing for them. I mean, people might like working with first-time home buyers. They might like helping people downsize their homes. There are all sorts of little niches people find themselves in, and people don't respond well to generalities. So if you say, I help everyone in the world, I don't know everyone in the world. But if you say, I help older couples, find a house that's better, that's a good downsized house, what'll happen is either you'll think about your parents, and something like that, or you'll say, well, my kid just got married and they're looking for a house. Could you help someone with that? And what you have there is the ideal elevator pitch. They've now qualified themselves, right? You now have a pre-qualified lead. And I tell people, I'm not suggesting you do any less work, right? I mean, real estate agents can work with helping anyone buy a house or investment property or any of those things. Mm-hmm. What you're looking for when you market, though, is to be very specific, because the specifics start the conversations. So I agree with your approach. The thing people tend to get wrong about that approach is that they're way too general in the way they describe it. So it doesn't start the kind of conversations it can start when you become a little bit more specific.
That's true. That's a great point. So what are the elements of a good elevator pitch? And do you think you need more than one at the tip of your tongue or in your back pocket, so to speak?
So I separate two kinds of elevator pitches. There's a 30-second pitch, and there's the answer to what do you do. Mm-hmm. And so for the 30-second pitch, you have to grab their attention, you have to start the conversation, and you have to call them to action. And so those are kind of the three pieces to it. And I have an hour-long process I take people through that helps them come up with those elements. And that's really when you have a chance to stand up and introduce yourself. But 95% of the time, you're really just talking to people one-to-one. And for there, I talk about conversation starters and icebreakers. So what you're looking for are quick things you can say that get them to respond to you. Because again, the elevator pitch, as you probably heard, it comes from the idea that you're stuck in an elevator with someone for 30 seconds, and so you can make your pitch.
Yes.
But I'll tell you, it's the worst place to ever use a 30-second elevator pitch, because who wants to be talked at for 30 seconds, right? I mean, if you're in the elevator pitch and you just launch into a prepared speech, that's not the way you get to know people. So you're better off asking them how their weekend was, or which floor they're going to, or, just starting the conversation any kind of way. So they think, this was an interesting person to talk to. Maybe I'll look for them again, right? So the idea that the elevator pitch is somehow going to close the sale in those 30 seconds in the elevator is completely off base. The reason people have multiple pitches is that their pitch isn't working well. So when you have a pitch that works, you'll never want to change it again, because you know how it works and you say it and people come up to you with leads. That's the way a good pitch works. The other problem with changing your pitch is that you'd be surprised how small the world is and how many people you've seen before are seeing you at this different event with a different audience. And if you're one thing at one event and a different thing at some other event, and you say something else at a different event, people spend all their time catching up to you. They can't ever figure out what you do. If one time I'm the elevator pitch and one time I'm delegating training and one time I do presentation coaching, and people have no idea who you are. And so from a marketing point of view, you're really better off having one pitch. And can you tailor it based on your audience? Of course. I mean, you can do that. But I'm telling you, the people that I've worked with and for myself, I mean, I've been the elevator pitch coach now for more than 10 years. And it's gotten me so many opportunities because people know when to call me. They know when to call me, and it generates other opportunities because people are already getting in touch with me for something that they need. I recommend trying a couple of pitches out. You try a pitch for a month, see how it works, then try something else to see if it's working better or worse. That's how you kind of get to the right kind of message that you want to send. But I don't generally recommend having multiple pitches at a time, because again, use one pitch on Monday and another pitch on Thursday. You'd be surprised how many people are at both events and don't recognize you because you're talking about something different. Whereas if you can talk about the same thing, that's how people start to recognize who you are and start to remember you.
Although I get your point that you don't want to confuse people. But let's say I'm working from home now because of the pandemic and I'm not out as much as possible. And I'd like to try out my pitch between the networking online meeting I was in on Monday and then the next one on Thursday. But there may be a few of the same people in the room.
So what I like to do is have people stick with one for a month, because then you get a sense of how it works. And I've done this myself. I had a great idea. I thought it was a great idea a couple of years ago, and I changed my pitch. And I used it a couple of times, and it completely bombed. And looking back, it was obvious why it had bombed. I mean, I should have known better. But I'm always trying out new techniques. I like to teach people, the best current ways of doing things. And when you use something for a month, I know it takes fortitude to do that. I know it's not easy. It is good to stick with it. And when you switch to something else, you'll know instantly whether it works better or worse, right? And if it works better, then you just stick with it. And if it works worse, then you go back to the thing you had and try to think up a different one. And that's what I help a lot of people with is that, I've got a pitch. It's not really working the best. I've tried this, I've tried that. What are some other things we can try? That's really, I just come up with more ideas for things to say that will help get you into the right kinds of conversations.
Let's separate in-person from virtual meet and greets and networking. What are the biggest shifts that you've seen?
Biggest shift I've seen is that online networking works better than people thought it would. I mean, the practice of going around the room and giving the 30-second elevator pitch, I don't feel works that well in person, and it's really boring online. So I'm encouraging people to use the breakout rooms and to actually generate conversations when they're doing online networking. And I'll never prefer Zoom. Like I want to go back to meeting in person. Like I miss my Rotary Club meetings. I miss my networking group meetings. Like I really miss seeing the people. I do have a feeling that once we go back to in-person stuff, we'll keep a virtual element, because some of my groups have picked up people from around the world. And some people have moved out of town, but they're still part of the group because they can still, log into Zoom. And so I'm really hoping that what comes out of this is that we'll be even more connected, that we'll go back to meeting in person, and we'll have a chance of doing, I don't like the word hybrid, but we'll have a chance of, some people will be online, some people will be in person. Like we'll have expanded the way that we network. So I think there are a lot of opportunities coming from that. And I think the folks that are kind of sitting waiting for it to go back to in-person networking, they're going to be behind, because there'll be some skills people have been learning from online that will be necessary kind of moving forward. So I think it's a great time to get used to doing online networking again. Zoom fatigue is a real thing. I don't like Zoom better than in-person networking. I think it will become part of what we do, because that there are people that I want to keep in touch with, even though they're not local to me now.
So let's think about all of those networking groups, and they are inviting people in to introduce themselves to everyone on the call. What is the best course of action for them to truly allow people to network and use these pitches that they've created?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I have worked with several chambers to reimagine their virtual business networking so that it's not 50 minutes of listening to commercials. And I like to say, like, I don't listen to commercials on TV, and going to an event that advertises itself as 50 minutes of commercials just doesn't seem it. And the thing that I've found that works is to put people into breakout rooms of 3 to 4 people and give them a prompt for discussion.
From the beginning, from the moment, as soon as the group amasses, then split people into breakouts right away.
Well, I do a little bit of preamble. I mean, if you want, if people want the full process, I can kind of go through with them again. Okay. I coach people on this, but you do a couple of things to break the ice, to get people moving, to get people talking to each other. I usually do a little bit of content and then break people into rooms, then do a little more content and then break people into rooms, and then that's pretty much been the hour. Like that's how it works. People really love the breakout rooms, and there's this sense people have when they're networking that they want to meet everyone in the room, and that's not the way networking works. You're really better off getting to know a few people. And I mean, in your group of 3 to 4 people, you might connect with 1 or 2 of them. I mean, I don't really expect you to connect with all of them, but in the groups and the people who come to my events and the events I've gone to where we do the networking, it's so much more fun. I mean, actually talking to people, and you have a prompt that starts the conversation, but networking is about having the conversations. It's about getting to know people. And you don't get to know people when everyone just takes their turn to give their 30-second pitch. You get to know people when you get a chance to sit down with them in a smaller group. And I love Zoom for this reason. The breakout rooms I found to be, that was the piece that was missing for doing, well, that and the necessity of it. But
yes,
the piece that was missing for online networking was being able to break into small groups and have discussions. And again, it's people's favorite part of the groups that I run.
I agree with that. That's an excellent point. I think that's the best part about Zoom is the breakouts, because you don't need to be in the full room with everyone listening to their pitches. You need to be with a core group of people that are truly tuned into you. And then after a certain period of time, changing the groups, perhaps, depending on the length of the meeting. Let's speak to those people that are going into their offices now, in those sparsely filled offices. How do you introduce yourself to an individual, or when you come upon a group of 3 or more people?
So I get this question a lot from people that, you walk into an event, or you're walking up to a group of people and everyone's in a conversation. And I get this all the time. Like, everyone's already in, whether you're on time or early or late to the meeting, you walk into the room and everyone's in a conversation. What do I do? And I'll say that this is one of the benefits of virtual networking, that when you get put into a breakout room, you have to talk to those people. So it removes that, especially for introverts, it removes that I have to approach people. So people are finding like value in the fact that you're going to be talking to this person who's now sitting on your screen. when you're in person, I like to recommend two approaches. The first is you can approach groups of 3 or more. So if there are 3 or more people talking, you can go and kind of hang on the edge and listen to what they're saying and kind of jump in. I encourage people too, when you're in a group of people talking at a networking event, if someone comes up, invite them in, just to be part of the group. The other option is to look at people who are standing alone. People tend to go to the bar, tend to go to the buffet line. Back when we can all eat together, but they tend to be hanging out there. And as nervous as you are about going up to someone, think about how nervous they are that they're just standing there and not talking to people. And I encourage people to remember that if someone comes up to you and starts talking, you're never mad about that. It's relief, right? If someone actually comes up and starts the conversation. And so the tip I'll give to all the viewers here is, the question I love to ask at events, especially in-person networking events, is, do you come to a lot of these kinds of events? Mm-hmm. And it's such a great question to ask because you get a lot of information. It's easy to answer. People love answering it. But you end up finding a little bit about them, a little bit about the group that you're in today. I've actually asked it of people who organize the groups. Like, do you come to a lot of these events? Like, yeah, well, I come to all of them because I'm the organizer. But now I've met the organizer, right? Now there are all sorts of questions I can ask them. There's all sorts of that's all really good information. So armed with that, you can walk up to people who are standing alone and say, hey, I'm Andy. So do you come to a lot of these kinds of events? And it really breaks the ice beautifully, and it's a great way of starting. So again, it's hard to break in on groups of 2. If you've got 2 people talking, there's really no unawkward way of breaking into that conversation. But groups of 3 or more, you can kind of stand there and be included. And again, if you really want to do people a favor, just look for the people who are standing at the bar, standing by the buffet with no one to talk to. And there always are. Like, you look around the room and it looks like everyone's in a conversation, but look over toward the bar or the buffet table and you'll see people who are itching for a conversation. And again, if you can, I know it's a big step for people, especially for those introverts, but if you can take that step to just walk up to someone and ask that question, they'll be relieved, you'll be relieved, and you'll start the conversation. And those can be really good people to talk to, right? I mean, the folks, the quiet ones are sometimes the best ones to get to know. So
I agree with you. How can a person stop being self-conscious and just come across as a totally confident person?
Yeah, so it's interesting, the way I teach the elevator pitch is you don't talk about yourself. Like, that's really the misconception people have, that you have to talk about yourself. And for the folks who go through my program and the folks that come to my networking groups, what you find is that you talk about the people that you help. That the elevator pitch is really strongest when you're being clear about who you're helping. And so if you talk about a recent client success, that's actually easy. People love doing that, right? I mean, people who are self-conscious, if you ask them to share a recent client success, they're happy to share that with you. And the story usually is pretty good and helpful. And by asking that question, I've learned more about people than I had in the past 3 years of listening to their elevator pitch every 2 weeks. But also, it's practice. And I think that, I say conversations become awkward when no one knows what to say. And so the way I help people and the way I learned myself, because I'm an introvert, people don't really believe that of me from what I do for a living now, but I am an introvert. I do a day of networking and I get home and I just want to be by myself. My wife does a day of networking. She wants to go out with her friends for the whole night, but I like to recharge by myself. So I think in summary, the way to come across as confident is to have some icebreakers in your back pocket. It makes conversations awkward as no one knows what to say next. And if you have a couple of things to say, like, did you travel a long way to come here? Do you come to a lot of these kinds of events? If you have a few phrases you can say, then when you feel the conversation lagging, you have something to move to. You have a next thing to say, and that really makes you a great conversationalist. And again, just having 2 or 3 of them will really, really smooth out the process.
What do you think are the best practices for politely getting out of a conversation?
Yeah, we've all been in this situation, right? Someone corners you and you can't get a word in edgewise and they just go on and on and on. And the best approach I've found to this is to say their name. So I find a lot with introverts too, that there are 2 things that are going on. You don't want to interrupt them because that's rude. And second of all, they might say something that's interesting. Like, I want to say, that's not going to happen. Right? If someone corners you and just starts talking your ear off, there's no reason to expect that something good is going to come out of that. And so what you're looking to do is to kind of interrupt them politely. And a great way to interrupt them politely is to use their name. You say, Susan, and they'll look at you, and it gets on their name tag. So you can just use their name and they'll look at you. That'll interrupt their monologue and say, you know what, it was great meeting you. I'd like to go network with other people now. And so the key there is to interrupt them, right? And then everyone understands that at networking, you're not supposed to sit and talk to the same person all the time. So you don't need to, I used to kind of use excuses. I'm going to go to the bathroom, I'm going to get a drink, but there's no reason to lie about it, right? You could just say, yeah, Susan, I've loved talking to you. It's been really interesting getting to know you. I'm going to go network with some other people now. And that works beautifully. Shaking hands is a really great way of ending a conversation. It's hard to continue talking kind of after you've shaken hands with someone. So,
Oh, used to be, Andrew. Now we have that elbow thing, but that's a
exactly.
whole different podcast I have coming
El-
up. I work with introverts, shy adults, self-conscious, and socially reserved professionals who are highly accomplished, but they have difficulty meeting people. What are your tips for them? I understand they are very different populations. Let's just say that the common thread may be that it's a push. Sometimes they would just rather be at home.
Yeah, so the thing I say, especially the introverts, and everyone has this idea that networking is actually best for extrovert. That's not really true. Like introverts make really good networkers because the goal of networking is to get to know people. And if you can put introverts in a one-to-one or one-to-two, a small group conversation, that's what they love doing, right? No, they don't like small talk, right? Introverts I found don't like small talk. They don't like being in a big room, not sure what to say. And so the thing I find helps, especially introverts and folks who are socially shy and things like that, is that when you're actually networking, when you're working at networking, the thing you're doing at a big networking event is looking for 2 to 3 people you want to have a coffee with. That's really the only goal. And people go and collect business cards and try to follow up, and that's just cold calling, right? I mean, if you go to an event and collect business cards and try to follow up with those people, that's actually worse than cold calling because you think you have a connection, but you don't. You call them and they have never heard of you, even though you saw them at the event and got their card. And so what I really encourage people to do is that over time, you're not going to need to go to events all the time. What you do is you go to events, you find out who you enjoy talking to. And you mentioned that earlier. How do you keep the conversation going? If the conversation doesn't go naturally, then they're not really a good networking contact for you. What I recommend is having a couple of icebreakers, trying to get the thing going. If the conversation doesn't get going, you can say, oh, it's really nice meeting you. I'm going to go network with other people. If the conversation does get going and you're enjoying talking to the person, that's a great time to invite them to a coffee meeting. Hey, I've enjoyed talking to you. I think we might be able to help each other grow our businesses. Would you like to sit down for coffee to explore that? So when you go to a networking event, what you're looking to come out of are 2 or 3 conversations with one other person, right? So you're going to sit down and talk to someone, having coffee or on Zoom or whatever it is, but you're looking to set up these coffee conversations where you're talking one-on-one with someone. And when you understand that the icebreakers and the conversation starters we use are simply to figure out who you like talking to, and then to invite those people out to coffee, that's networking. And I found that all the good stuff that happens from networking, none of it happens at the event. None of it happens at the networking group meeting. None of it happens at the chamber event. It all happens when you get to know people outside the context of what people call networking, right? When you sit down and get to know people, that's when the opportunities show up. A lot of introverts blame themselves like, oh, I'm no good at conversations, but a lot of people aren't good at conversations. And in a room of 40 people, if you can have a good conversation with 2 or 3 or maybe 4 of them, that's actually a pretty good night of networking.
Those are all great points. But now you have me thinking, is networking really important for your career, or can socially reserved people stay home and meet people and book coffee chats through LinkedIn? Why not?
So you can. I have found that the online stuff works best with people that I already know in person. So I've been working really hard at things like LinkedIn and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. And people say, how do I network on Twitter? And we're social beings. We are social creatures. For the folks that are looking to grow their business, for the folks that are looking to do more, I know this is scary. It is the key skill, and it doesn't take that long. I mean, I've worked with clients who had been networking for like 2 years and not gotten anything out of it. And I know it's easier to kind of be in your cocoon, but you're not going to get the best opportunities that way. Like things are fine. And I say to people too, that the work that I do with people, the people that I work with, like introverts, if someone comes to them and wants to talk about their area of expertise, they're fine, right? They don't mind that at all. That's great. They love that, right? I mean, if
That's
someone
true.
comes,
You can go on forever.
if to talk to the architect or talk to the lawyer or talk to the accountant or talk to the dog walker or whoever, like if you want to talk to them, I'm not a sales coach. People say, Andy, are you a sales coach? I'm not. Like the people that I work with, once someone wants to know about their expertise, they love that. They can talk about that forever. So my job is to help them craft words that get the right people to come and talk to them, right? That's really what I'm looking for. When you go to a networking event, you should have 2 coffees come out. You get 3 people, but usually only 2 people will schedule a coffee with you. So you go to an event, you have 2 coffees. And so if people are going to 7 events a week, I say, okay, so you're having 14 coffees next week? And they're like, oh, I couldn't schedule 14 coffees. I don't have time for that. Right. You're going to too many events, right? If you can schedule 4 coffees next week, that's 2 events a week.
Excellent point, Andrew.
Right. So that's the thing. If you're just going to a bunch of events, you're not actually making connections with anyone. You're just kind of cold calling your way through things. And again, if you want to go on LinkedIn and set up coffee meetings, that's fine. I wouldn't use the chat on LinkedIn to get to know people. But if you want to go on LinkedIn and try to set up coffee meetings, that's fine. I mean, it's hard to set up a cold coffee meeting.
I would have to say never reach out to people, cold call people on LinkedIn. Just make connections that way.
I do believe that. I mean, again, and I'm an introvert. Like, I was very shy. It was very hard for me to start conversations. I started off not really knowing at all what I was doing, and you can learn it. Like, it is possible to learn it. And the choice is cold calling strangers or hanging out with friends, right? Networking is really more like hanging out with friends. Once you've met a few people and you go out to coffee, and then the next time you see them at an event, then you know them. And so it's not as scary anymore. And you'd be amazed how many people keep coming to the same events. To me, that really is the key. That, everyone's like, oh, I went to an event and nothing happened. Like, all right, well, how many people did you follow up with? Nobody. All right, well, how many people did you talk to? And it's interesting because I networking meeting, and then we'll have a call afterwards, and we'll talk about who they met. And it's so interesting because like, oh, nothing happened. And then we talk about it like, oh, that would be a really interesting person. Like, that could be a referral partner for me. Oh, that other person, they were really fun to talk to. Maybe I should. And so we end up with 2 or 3 people they can follow up with. And it's important to notice the people you connect with and enjoy talking to. And they'll be happy to talk to you more because they feel the connection too. And again, especially with introverts and shy people, all they're looking for is to have that close connection with someone.
What are the 5 critical signposts for business networking?
Well, thanks for asking that. There are 5 skills I teach people when I do my 3-month coaching with them, kind of business networking coaching. And the first step is to choose the right events. Again, I like to make the distinction between cold calling and networking here. Cold calling is going to a one-off event is cold calling. You're never going to see those people again. You're not going to make the connections. I don't really feel like that's a good use of time. And even if the event is quarterly, that's better, right? Then you have people going to kind of quarterly events. So I like to look for recurring events, or I love networking groups for this reason, because you meet on a regular basis. You can get to know the people in your group. Like, I found that to be a really good way of doing it. The second step is to meet the right people. You're looking for people that you enjoy talking to. And I'll say too, that if you run into someone who's a prospect, like if you're out networking and you meet someone who has the budget and burning need for your stuff, set up a sales meeting, right? You don't network with prospects. You network with non-prospects. If you find someone who has who wants your product or service, then set up a sales meeting and then go network with other people. So that's meeting the right people. But from a networking point of view, you don't build trust in 1 or 2 or 3 conversations. That happens over time. And so you're looking for people that you enjoy talking to, because you're going to have to talk to them a bunch of times in order to kind of build that trust. Strengthening relationships. Again, I have a whole process for coffee meetings: who you invite, what you say when you're there, good questions to ask, how you know when the coffee meeting's over, right? So the strengthening relationships, that's really what it is. People go to events, say nothing's happening. And that's true. Like, if you go to events, that's about 5% of the work. The 95% of the work comes in meeting with people offline. The effective follow-up, again, it's kind of what we've been talking about. Most of the people you're not going to connect with. Nothing happens. And that's okay. I had a coffee meeting recently where a lot of stuff happened. They came to one of my events, and I'm going to do some talks for them. And there's some other stuff like that. You think that every conversation has to work, but it doesn't. Like, go have a nice conversation. If there's nothing more, then there's nothing more. And then the final thing is give professional referrals. And this, to me, is really the key to the whole thing. Like, we're not taught anywhere how to connect the right people with the right people. And referrals don't have to be for business. A good referral is a book that someone's going to read. You could refer someone into a nonprofit that could help their kid. As you get to know people and as you start to understand what people do, there's kind of a lot of ways you can move people around. And I'll just say that, I gave them your name and number is not a referral. True. Right. Like, because a lot of people say that to me, and I've never ever gotten a call off that. If you're going to make professional referrals, and I'm telling you, when you make a referral to someone, you stay top of mind with them. Like, everyone loves that, but you have to get permission from both, and you have to do a co-introductory email. Again, I walk people through the whole process, but it's something I found to be very helpful. I do it all the time. People are like, oh, just introduce me. I'm like, I'll check with them. I'll make sure they're open to it, and then I'll send a co-introductory email. And again, I have templates for all this stuff for the folks that I work with and the people that I'm helping with their business networking. So those are the 5: choose the right events, meet the right people, strengthen your relationships, effective follow-up, and give professional referrals. Those, to me, are the 5 signposts. As you're navigating this, getting to know people and developing the relationships and developing the trust so that people know good referrals for you.
How can listeners today determine whether they would benefit from your elevator pitch coaching program or just keep winging it?
Yeah, I winged it for a long time, I got to say. People come up to me all the time. People get nervous when I'm at a networking event, and I'm speaking. It's like, oh, you're going to judge my elevator pitch. And what I would say to you is, if you feel like there might be a better way, like if you're out networking and you've got this pile of business cards, you don't know what to do with it, and the conversations aren't starting, and you're just not, that's a good time to contact me to kind of fix up your elevator pitch and make sure you're attending the right events, make sure you're meeting the right people, make sure you're getting the most out of your coffee meetings.
Andrew, what's next for you?
So I've been having a really good time teaching people virtual business networking, really helping people connect online. And I think that's going to continue for a little while. I'm all excited about the potential vaccine, that'll get us back. But some of the groups that I've been running, we have international participants now. And I'm really excited at the thought that networking won't need to be completely local anymore, that there'll be opportunities to do your local networking. Like, I think that's important. But you never know who you're going to meet. Out of necessity, we've come up with this whole new set of skills. And so for me, I love teaching people these skills and working on it and kind of seeing where virtual networking is going to take us. I think it's pretty exciting.
Perfect. Andrew, I knew you'd be a delightful and valuable guest. You're the best.
Thanks, Susan. This was fun. I really appreciate the conversation.
Soft Power Society, if you love listening to podcasts and receive some value today, please be so kind to leave a rating and review in the Apple Podcast app. I hope you enjoyed our chat today with Andrew Winig, and you can find him at improvandy.com. And I'll also link to his newsletter in the show notes. Also, I have something special for you. It's my new cheat sheet, Secret Social Skills Tips Nobody Taught You. If you want to enter meetings with confidence, make small talk, and have conversations that don't leave you or the other person cringing, well, I've created a comprehensive list for you, and they work. There's a link in the show notes, or you can go to businessclass.expert to download a copy. Thanks for joining me today. Bye for now.